Alright, hello ladies and gentlemen, Ben Friedman here, and today we are going to battle in a standard league with a personal favorite of mine in the new standard format, and that is Cardu, or Mardu vehicles, for those of you who are less inclined to make dumb jokes. But the basic theme of the deck is, well, it's an aggressive vehicle-based deck that has a smattering of good removal spells, a smattering of very aggressively costed creatures, and just a hint of black mana in order to increase the deck's resilience to removal spells via Scrapheap Scrounger, as well as increasing the deck's ability to answer any type of opposing creature, especially flash creatures like opposing Archangel Avacyns, with unlicensed disintegrations. Unlicensed disintegration being a very powerful card that offers a great effect for an aggressive deck in removing a blocker and punching the opponent for 3 damage in most scenarios. So let's break it down. Starting from the mana base, we've got 4 Aether Hubs, which is an excellent land in this deck. It can often power up your Harness Lightnings to a 4 damage removal spell, which is awesome. And if you need it for mana, in a pinch, it will provide you with any color of your choosing. Concealed Courtyard, of course, is there to allow us to have nearly free access to the black mana for Scrounger or Disintegration. Inspiring Vantage, obviously, is the best red-white dual land for an aggressively slanted deck, as it comes into play untapped, deals you no damage when it taps for mana, and it just does everything you could ask for. Obviously, it's not good after turn 4, but, can't have everything. We're not playing Legacy, so we don't get to play with real dual lands. We've got 6 mountains and 4 plains to round out the mana base of a fairly straightforward red-white deck. Then the creatures start with the best creature in Standard. I'm talking, of course, about Inspector Gadget, aka Thraben Sinspector. The Inspector is awesome. It does a lot for this deck in smoothing out draws with the Clue token, in creating an artifact with the Clue token, which will trigger the Toolcraft Exemplar and turn it into the best wild Nacatl that we have seen in Standard in a very long time, and provide the bonus for Inventor's Apprentice to turn this little nerd ape into a big curd ape. So basically, Thraben Sinspector is doing everything this deck could hopefully ask for, and not really asking for a lot in return. It only costs 1 mana, and it's still a 1 power body to get in the chopper, as Arnold Schwarzenegger would say. So yeah, we've got the Inspector. The Exemplar here is just a super, super powerful aggressive creature that also gets the bonus from our Depala, and Inventor's Apprentice is kind of the third wheel here. It's not quite as good as either of the other ones, but it's still a powerful card. I have 2 copies of Declaration in Stone in my list, and part of the reason for that is that I'm scared of losing to prized amalgam decks, and I just want to have more removal spells for possible prized amalgam chains. And part of it is that Declaration in Stone is actually pretty good against opposing mirror match type decks, especially if the opponent comes up with a couple Scrapheap Scroungers. It's important to have access to this spell. I'm playing 3 Harness Lightnings instead of the typical 4 because I wanted to find a couple slots to make room for the declarations. Of course, we've got 4 Veteran Motorists. This card does a huge amount for us in smoothing out our draws and in being an excellent crew member for our truck and our helicopter. So, Veteran Motorist, hats off to you. Best crew member I could ask for, and an excellent scry piece of the puzzle to boot. Scrapheap Scrounger I've talked about already. An excellent crew member, an excellent and resilient creature to beat down with, and I really have no complaints about Scrapheap Scrounger, other than that I can't really see a face on the Scrounger. It sort of has a face. I don't know. I don't really trust faceless artifacts. I can trust an Arcbound Ravager because it's got those nasty teeth, but a Scrapheap Scrounger appears to have a sort of an eye that's shooting laser beams or something. I don't know. But regardless, Scrapheap Scrounger is doing a lot of work in this deck. Obviously, without Smuggler's Copter, the deck would be a lot worse. This card, well, what really needs to be said about it that hasn't already been said? It's aggressively costed. It's evasive. It smooths out your draws. It does everything you could ask for, and it's part of the reason why this deck is successful. Depala Pilot Exemplar is an awesome top-end creature for the deck. Opponents feel pressured to kill it immediately, which is great for us because if they don't, we get to draw a bunch of cards, and if they do, well, that just, bought us breathing room for our other creatures to continue to truck on in. And speaking of trucking on in, we've got the Cultivator's Caravan, which is an excellent dump truck. It's great because it ramps us to consistently hit enough mana to cast our big 5-drop of Archangel Avacyn, and it's great because if we are getting flooded, we can simply hop in the back of the truck and get cracking on some beatdowns. And a 5/5 for 3, well, that's Dorian the Siege Tower territory for me. So I'm a big fan of the Caravan. Obviously, we have Unlicensed Disintegration, as I said earlier. It's an excellent removal spell, and even though it costs 3 mana, which is a lot for a deck like this, it just does so much, and a lot of times opponents will be praying that we don't have one in our hands because that's the only card that they would lose to. Let's take a look at the sideboard real quick before we hop into any games. And this sideboard is a little interesting. We've got obviously 2 Fragmentizes, which is a key card for beating up on mirror matches and for having an out, although not a great out, to Aetherworks Marvel. If the opponent has an Aetherworks Marvel and somehow doesn't have the requisite energy or somehow has whiffed on their activation, you can snag it with a Fragmentize and potentially buy yourself a critical turn to win the game. We have 3 Transgress the Minds. This card is mostly important against control decks and green-black Delirium, but it obviously also hits Aetherworks Marvel and can potentially be a game winner there. We have 1 more Declaration in Stone in the sideboard. This is important for our sideboard strategy against green-black Delirium, where we turn into kind of a board control Planeswalker strategy. We have 2 Always Watchings, which is a great card in the mirror match and against blue-white Flash, as it pumps up our creatures to tussle with theirs and come out alive, and it is just great against small removal spells because it just puts our creatures out of range. Unlicensed Disintegration number 3, similar to the Declaration in Stone, it's a hard removal spell that offers us an advantage, and it's very important to have access to this card against Torrential Gearhulk decks, because Torrential Gearhulk is a problem. If you can't kill it, the body will stop you from really getting aggressive with any of your creatures, and it's important to have access to that. We got 4 Gideon Ally of Zendikar. It's part of our sideboard plan into Anthem effects between Always Watching and Gideon, and Gideon is just a super powerful card. When we shift our game plan to be a little bit bigger, to have more powerful spells and fewer super aggressive creatures, we get to juke out our opponents who are bringing in tons and tons of cheap removal spells like Grasp of Darkness, or Harnessed Lightning, or Galvanic Bombardment, or Essence Extraction, or Murder, or Flaying Tendrils, or Kozilek's Return, or Radiant Flames. I think I just listed every single one in the book, but Gideon Ally of Zendikar is great in those situations because the opponent will be left thinking that they were playing against an aggressive strategy, but instead they are now going to face down a big angry Gideon. Similarly, this is my tech piece for the testing. Chandra Flamecaller, I think, is awesome against green-black Delirium, as we are sideboarding out all of our creatures that are vulnerable to their Liliana. The Liliana, the Last Hope +1 ability, if they can get a Veteran Motorist or a Toolcraft Exemplar with it, it's just a huge tempo swing, and we often lose those games. So we want to change our deck around to be less vulnerable to those small removal spells, the -1/-1s and the -2/-2s from cards like Flying Tendrils, and be way more resilient with a ton of Anthem effects and bigger power hitters alongside Transgress the Mind, which can disrupt the opponent, keep them from hitting any of their power cards in Ishkana or Kalidas, or potentially an Emrakul even. You can snag that with Transgress the Mind. And yeah, often Transgress can open up holes for us to successfully break through with our creatures and our planeswalkers as well. So I'm pretty excited about the potential of this deck, and I'm ready to hop into games if you are. So let's get right at it.